Well, hello everyone. I'm Emily Porter. I'm the repository program manager at the Emory Libraries and Museums. And I'm here also with my colleagues Brad Watson and Beth Crompton. I'll be going through the slide deck, but they should be able to chime in if anybody has any questions about some of the details we're talking about today. And I wanted to preface this presentation with the fact that Erin always welcomes us to present on the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I would describe this one as the scary. So if you don't like scary stories, you may not want to hear this session. But yes, we are talking about how to avert a data disaster in Fedora 4 and the importance of local preservation strategies. So I'll give a little context about kind of where we are. We're in an unusual position of currently running Fedora 3, Fedora 4, and Fedora 6. Unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about our happy story about Fedora 6, but we did complete a migration of one of our larger collections out of Fedora 3 all the way up to 6. But what we're talking about today is our Fedora 4 instance. And that is within a Samvera Hyrax context. So I won't spend too much time um, going through. Yeah, yes, I see. Yes, it is a trigger warning. Looking at the chat there. Some of our architecture components, we use a lot of the standard Samvera components. That includes Hyrax software version 3. We are using Fedora 4.7.6 for our preservation and storage. And we also use Solr for additional indexing and discovery. We have, other dependencies related to that. We also, I'm not sure how common this is, but we do utilize Fedora 4 with S3 storage for our binary files. We have a MySQL 8 database for some of our application-centric data. We use Cantaloupe Server for our IIIF manifests. And then we have some other additional front-end frameworks involved as well. So what we have to talk about today, unfortunately, I personally have been referring to this as the case of the missing RDF predicates. And I have actually scheduled working meetings with that title. But what we are experiencing is that after 5 years of loading a lot of data into Fedora 4 in production, our binary resources in Fedora 4 have suddenly stopped resolving or delivering certain RDF type assignments. And these typically are related to PCDM, Portland Common Data Model. At times, they will spontaneously reappear, but not for all files. And we've been having a protracted outage related to this for almost 2 months in our production environment. And right now, we've had to pause any new ingests until we can fully diagnose this issue. And while we've been digging into this, we also found RDF type assignments for other levels of the PCDM hierarchy were showing this behavior. So, for example, a work as opposed to a file. Um, we also found that characterization data, so the technical data that we extract from files during our ingest process, was also missing from our Hyrax interface. because of the way Hyrax queries Fedora directly at some points, and some points it's directly reaching out to Solr. We also had some challenges just trying to find reference examples for exactly what should be there and what is now missing. We did reach out to communities and ask, can you please send a screenshot of a binary resource in your Fedora, for instance, and show us what you're seeing. Thank you to Ben Pennell for providing us with one. And we're all just kind of grappling with obviously mode shape and Fedora 4 support. Where actually is the RDF data stored? We do know how to manually navigate through, as Nicole was just talking about, but kind of using the Fedora UI, navigate through the RDF tree all the way down to the file level, and we know that we can download them. But our Hyrax application cannot find them. And when we're going through this type of outage, we either have to manually retrieve and send files to users if for some reason they can't be retrieved through the IIIF manifest. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But here's a screenshot that's showing what we should expect to see and what we have seen for, you know, 5 years. But those PCDM assignments for, you know, specifying a binary resource within that RDF type as a file, and also what its PCDM use context is. And kind of at the bottom of the screen that I'm showing, you can see that those PCDM assignments have disappeared. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've done to try to diagnose this. Again, we've been working on this problem for several months now. I know I'm not going to be completely listing everything that we've tried, but we did check our connection to our S3 storage bucket. We actually reached out to AWS about that. That did not appear to be the problem. We've looked a little bit at our Fedora web server proxy setup involving Tomcat and Apache. That may be a unique local thing that we have, but it is what we have right now. We've reached out to Samvera and the Fedora tech communities, and we appreciate everyone who's responded to us. We also did some networking tests to including hosting a static copy of PCDM on our own local server and trying to get Fedora to resolve that to our IP. We've done elaborate reviews of data in terms of what displays in Hyrax, what displays in Fedora, what we have in our Solr index. We've done curl requests on, Fedora IDs to see what comes back in terms of the RDF data. We've had a lot of fun doing live log reading sessions where I click on things and Beth and Brad read the logs to see. That's been another challenge. It's just we are not seeing a lot of helpful information coming back from the logs, particularly when it comes to Fedora. We've also tried manually patching back in those missing RDF assignments into individual Fedora resources. That works, but obviously we can't do that for 2 million files. I know we've tried to read documentation, but it does seem, where we are now today in 2025, there isn't a lot of helpful documentation about kind of the architecture and where RDF data is stored. And this also gets into another point where we assume, and I think others in the communities assume that the actual RDF statements are not being technically validated, as in if a URI doesn't resolve, Fedora isn't necessarily checking that. At least that's been our case for many years. So now we're going to kind of get a little more into kind of how our local preservation. Thank you, Joshua. Yes, I know it couldn't be. I know it wasn't technically validated. Um, but the importance of knowing thy data and also thy data model. So for the most part, we use the standard Hyrax PCDM data model. We know how to kind of navigate that and get all the way down to an individual file. We have made some local additions to that model. One of those use cases is that we have the ability to structure a file set, which in hierarchs context means kind of a grouping of files so that we have a primary preservation file, but we also can accommodate derivatives related to that file as well. And then getting back to the RDF namespaces and URIs, many of these namespaces and URIs used throughout our application and in standard Samvera applications are either placeholders or some of those more formal ontologies maybe have been versioned and the URI that we're using doesn't actually resolve anymore. But again, we haven't had an issue with this at all until the last couple of months. We also have another customization in place, which relates to our derivatives, in that, for example, if we have a digitized scanned image, we preserve the kind of original version, which may have color bars and other things on it. And then we have by using PCDM use terms, an intermediate file. So that may be cropped and straightened, something like that. And then we serve out that kind of preferred version because we don't really want our end users to see, the color bars or maybe the image is slightly crooked, that sort of thing. So we have that in place. And also just kind of related to understanding the data model, which again, it can be a challenge related to the combination of the software versions that we're using, but really having an understanding of what data is stored and indexed and where is it. Another aspect of understanding the data is the fact that we have good working knowledge of file naming conventions that have been used over the years and in different eras of our local digitization. And now I'm going to talk about some of the additional local enhancements that we have made to our Samvera Hyrax application. And one of these is that we create our own preservation events sort of audit trail. And these are somewhat based on premise. They are not necessarily structured according to the premise ontology. We also record events using the names as best we can from the Library of Congress preservation events vocabulary. But one thing I know you probably can't read this on the screen that I'm showing, but some important things that we do are record a record of the fact that the file was ingested and submitted to storage, and that includes the original file name. Um, and then we record information about the checksums that were generated. And this particular example also shows that if we run a fixity check on something, we have a record of that as well. So that was a lot of work for us to implement, but it is really, really helping us out right now, because we have that audit trail and we know what the original file names are. We've also made the effort to provide additional indexing in our Solar index to include this data and also some other data related to, for example, the technical file metadata and characterization data uh, about the files. We have a Glacier storage backup of the original uploaded files, and that also provides us with some essentially folder and file name context. We have the external S3 storage for binaries, and I'll probably circle back on that one, but right now I'm really grateful, even though in Fedora 4 context, we only have the binary files there. We don't have the metadata there. But if we are experiencing a problem like this and we had Fedora managing the binaries, I'm not sure what we would be doing right now. Um, we have a backup and restoration process. We haven't gotten to that point yet. And even if we did restore to a backup, I'm not sure if that would resolve anything. Um, that would also be a process that might involve us losing months of ingested data. So we're not quite there yet. But again, also just having local documentation for best practices or local conventions and having a preservation policy. So now I'm going to speak about what we've been doing to try to develop a workaround for this problem. And again, just kind of building on the fact that we know from documentation and our preservation events trail, we know what the expected files are for a given object, how they are grouped and labeled, and we should be able to write bypass methods to retrieve them. This does get into some very custom local logic uh, to determine based upon the file name or how many files are present for a given object to kind of sort out, is this the original primary file? Is it one of the derivatives? How do we sort that out? But we have that in place. Um, we also have other sources of data about our files. For example, we generate AAAF manifests, and fortunately, we cache them. And these manifests they record the SHA-1 checksum path, which happens to be the ID in our S3 storage. So our end users in our public-facing discovery system, for the most part, can view and download the files. In some cases, not so much. But and as I mentioned before, we are also indexing that preservation event data as well as some other technical characteristics about files. And so all of these have been critical for us to try to build our own software side retrieval uh, to reconstruct direct paths into for downloading and retrieving files from Fedora. Still a work in progress, but we're getting much closer. And course, as I mentioned earlier, we would love to get all our data into Fedora 6. And unfortunately, this particular problem has really increased our urgency to begin this process. We weren't necessarily planning to do it right now, but we're trying to, you know, get underway with that and start planning for it. And we have had very good success with our partial migration of our Fedora 3 data into Fedora 6. And I also just want to reiterate everything I'm talking about today, I think really affirms the point of OCFL and why having the metadata in the files in the same storage root is essential. If the metadata itself is somehow, you know, in in mode shape or wherever it is, we don't have a direct path to kind of interact with that. Another uh, factor for us is that the scale of our repository and how long that might take. We obviously can't afford time-wise or financially to kind of export and re-ingest 25 terabytes of data that we've been loading for 5 years. The other factor for us is how we are going to move forward with a migration using kind of emerging or established tools if we're missing some of the data because of those missing RDF entries. And so I'm going to wrap up here with the scary slide. But I do want to say, for us personally, we are not exposing our data as a linked open data source. We don't have any intentions of doing that, particularly because we use Fedora as our preservation system of record. We have other systems of record that are the primary descriptive sources. So I guess what I'm saying here is we've experienced a lot of the pain of RDF, but in our context, none of the benefits are involved. And I have a couple of screenshots here just to show like how, we've been like actually trying to see if we could find any documentation about mode shape. I found an archived community site, and I think, you know, me typing in ask mode shape and getting a 404 errors, not very encouraging. And I think we're also worried, have we hit some kind of strange data threshold? That is why I'm showing this event horizon image here. And then I'm also showing an image of my cat being very concerned. So thank you all. Um, if anyone has any comments or thoughts or ideas, we would love to have them. I've added a couple of links to our slide deck just about that gets a little more into what we've done with our preservation functionality and also some of our tests that we've done previously to try to replicate the Hierarchs data model in Valkyrie in Fedora 6.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know I do always say the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so sometimes it's good to just get the conversations out there so that we can, maybe crowdsource some solutions, or maybe people are experiencing something similar, and hopefully get to the bottom of it. Questions for
Well,
Emily?
Well, I could I could say a lot of to this, but I try to be very short. Maybe we can continue this um, in another channel. But I, as I, well, I'm the first, since I'm not scared
I'm glad to hear
at the
that.
moment.
I'm glad to hear that.
No, well, doesn't sound very well, but I think the problem should not be that big. As I understood you, the RDF triples you were missing in Hyrex, you find them in Fedora. Is that true? No, they're gone as well. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that is the problem. So um, when going into Fedora looking for those particular triples, they are
yeah.
missing.
Okay, I
And
see.
that is the frightening part. We
Yeah, yeah,
know we know what they should be. We know that they are missing, um, but it's only happening on that RDF type
yeah, yeah.
assignment.
Well, a simple a question I can answer to you in because I talked a little bit on this and this morning on Fedora 4. Your metadata are stored in typically in a database. Not in Fedora 4, not on disk. There you could find it, but you have that byte array, and you can't. It's difficult to read that. Um, but one thing what you didn't mention, I think, is the Redis server. Did you check that? For the communication between the various components of Hyrex, the Solar server and the Fedora stack, a Redis server is needed, and maybe I think that could be a problem. That not all the data are transferred from the ingest, what you're doing in Hyrex, and then moving it to Fedora. Maybe
Yeah,
some
and
sort of
my colleague Beth just responded, we do have Redis in place, and
yeah.
that is something that we haven't fully tracked. So that would be another thing that we could add to one of our live log reading sessions.
Do you have any
Yeah, yeah, I see.
specific suggestions on that? Thank you so much for a suggestion, any suggestion. But anything more specific than Redis communication between everything? Okay.
Yeah, and that's been part of our process too, is just trying to figure out the data flow and the logs and which things we need to turn more
I
aggressive
see.
logging on. And unfortunately, we have not seen anything showing up in the Fedora logs that indicate a problem. Um, I think I may have mentioned that we were also, doing curl requests directly on objects,
I see.
and those RDF assignments are just gone.
Yeah, I think you do have all the usual suspects with Solar and so on. Some years ago, really, I faced some mode shape problems that on a I'm not sure if in Fedora 4.7.6 is still the InfiniSpan stack being used. I think not. But when that was, that also caused some trouble.
I
Not transporting not transporting every data from your ingest process to Fedora itself. That could be, but I don't think so. I would suspect it could be the Redis server.
It could be we have seen some mode shape related errors.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah.
that is, again, part of my scary tale.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
that.
Mode was a mess in the end, and that's one of the reasons it was abandoned. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your commentary. And again, we're trying to find our way through this problem, but we certainly would welcome any suggestions or ideas that anyone else has.
Yeah, great to hear. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll keep our ear to the ground for that, and maybe at some point there's a like a group discussion or something that we can coordinate to potentially walk through it and see where we can find some solutions for you and anybody else that might be experiencing something similar. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Team Emory, for this